Order in court. The hammer sounded strong, but the 7-year-old girl did not flinch a little. His little hands held a folder of documents that could change everything. His father was minutes from being unjustly convicted, and she was the only person in the world who could save him. "His Honor, I am the defense lawyer," he said in a trembling but determined voice. But no one could have imagined what would come next. If you're enjoying this incredible story, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more inspiring stories like this one. The fluorescent lights of the Jefferson County Courthouse buzzed overhead while Lucy Martinez, age 7, held a worn briefcase that was nearly her size. Her small hands trembled, but her brown eyes held a determination that would have impressed seasoned attorneys. The security guard looked at her with confusion. "Sweetheart, are you lost? Where's your mommy?" asked Officer Thompson, his voice gentle but concerned. Lucy straightened her small shoulders, wearing a navy blue dress that her late grandmother had sewn for church. "I'm here for the Martinez case, sir. I'm representing my daddy." The guard's eyebrows shot up. In his 15 years at this courthouse, he had never heard anything like this. "Sweetie, you can't just—" "I know what I'm doing," Lucy interrupted, her voice cracking slightly but remaining firm. "My daddy didn't do what they're saying he did. He's innocent, and I'm going to prove it." 3 months earlier, Robert Martinez had been arrested for embezzling $50,000 from the Wilson Construction Company, where he had worked as a supervisor for 8 years. The evidence seemed overwhelming. The money had been transferred to an account bearing his name. Security footage showed him accessing the company's safe after hours, and his own signature appeared on falsified invoices. But Lucy knew something the police didn't know. On the night before his arrest, her father had come home with lines of worry etched deep into his face. He had knelt beside her bed and whispered, "Misha, if anything happens to Daddy, remember that sometimes good people get blamed for bad things. But the truth always finds a way to shine through the darkness." She hadn't understood then. Now she did. Leave a comment below telling us which part of the story has impressed you the most so far. With her mother, Sophia, working double shifts as a nurse to pay the bills and unable to afford a lawyer, Lucy had made a decision that shocked everyone who knew her. She would defend her father alone. The public library became her second home. Mrs. Thompson, the elderly librarian, watched in amazement as this little girl checked out law books meant for law students, criminal law for beginners, understanding court procedures, evidence and testimony, books that weighed more than Lucy's backpack. "Are you sure you can handle these, dear?" Mrs. Thompson had asked. "My daddy is counting on me," Lucy had replied simply. Night after night, while other children her age watched cartoons, Lucy sat at the kitchen table with highlighters and notebooks, learning words like due process, burden of proof, and reasonable doubt. She slept only 3 hours a night, surviving on determination and the peanut butter sandwiches her mother left for her. The hardest part wasn't understanding the law, it was visiting her father in jail. Through the thick glass partition, Robert Martinez looked older, his calloused hands pale from lack of sunlight, his eyes filled with tears every time he saw his little daughter preparing for battle. "Lucy, you don't have to do this," he would whisper into the phone. "I'll find another way." "No, Daddy," she would respond, pressing her small palm against the glass. "You taught me that when someone you love is in trouble, you don't give up, you fight." Now, standing in the marble hallway of the courthouse, Lucy checked her watch, a gift from her father that hung loose on her thin wrist. The trial would begin in 10 minutes. Judge Harrison had reluctantly agreed to let her represent her father after she cited 3 constitutional amendments and 2 Supreme Court cases from memory during their preliminary meeting. The prosecutor, District Attorney James Mitchell, had laughed when he learned of his opponent. "This will be the easiest case of my career," he told his team. But Assistant Prosecutor Daniel Cooper hadn't laughed. Something about the little girl's fierce determination had made him nervous, very nervous, and for good reason. If you're rooting for Lucy, hit that like button right now. Lucy opened her briefcase and pulled out a manila folder marked Evidence. Inside were documents that would change everything. Documents that someone had tried very hard to hide. Documents that proved her father was innocent. What she didn't yet know was that the real criminal was closer than she imagined, closer than anyone imagined. As Lucy walked toward courtroom 3B, her small footsteps echoing in the vast hallway, she had no idea that someone was watching her every move, someone who knew exactly what was in that manila folder, someone who would do anything to ensure those documents never saw the light of day. The courthouse clock struck 9:02. It was time for the fight of her young life to begin. Judge Harrison's gavel echoed through courtroom 3B as Lucy Martinez walked through the heavy oak doors. Every head turned. Whispers spread through the gallery like wildfire. Is that really a child? This has to be a joke. Where are her parents? But Lucy had eyes only for her father, Robert, sitting at the defendant's table in an orange jumpsuit that hung loose on his diminished frame. When their eyes met, he mouthed silently, "I love you, Mija." District Attorney James Mitchell rose from his chair, his expensive suit and silver hair commanding immediate respect. At 55, he had never lost such a straightforward case. He looked at Lucy with barely concealed amusement. "Your Honor," Mitchell began, his voice booming, "I object to this circus. A 7-year-old child cannot possibly understand the complexities of criminal law." Judge Harrison, a stern woman in her 60s, leaned forward. "Mr. Mitchell, this court has already ruled on Miss Martinez's representation. The defendant has waived his right to an attorney, and Miss Martinez has demonstrated adequate knowledge of legal procedures." Lucy stepped forward, her voice clear despite her racing heart. "Your Honor, my father is innocent. The evidence will show that someone else stole that money and framed him for it." The courtroom buzzed with murmurs. Assistant Prosecutor Daniel Cooper shifted uncomfortably in his seat. His hands clenched so tight, his knuckles turned white. He kept staring at Lucy's briefcase, sweat forming on his forehead despite the air conditioning. "Mr. Mitchell, you may present your opening statement," Judge Harrison announced. Mitchell stood, addressing the jury with practiced confidence. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is a simple case of theft. Robert Martinez had access to the Wilson Construction Company safe. Security footage shows him there after hours. The stolen money was found in an account bearing his name. His signature appears on falsified invoices. The evidence is overwhelming and undeniable." Lucy watched the jury's faces carefully, as she had read in her law books. Mrs. Chen, the retired teacher in seat 4, looked sympathetic. Mr. Anderson, the mechanic in seat 7, seemed skeptical of Mitchell's certainty. When Mitchell finished, Lucy stood. Her legs felt like jelly, but she remembered her father's words. "Courage isn't about not being afraid, Mija. It's about doing what's right, even when you're scared." "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," Lucy began, her young voice carrying surprisingly well in the large room. "My daddy taught me that truth is like a diamond buried in mud. It might be hard to see at first, but when you wash away all the dirt, it shines brighter than anything else." Some jury members leaned forward, intrigued by the unexpected eloquence from such a small person. "The prosecutor wants you to believe that my father stole money from people he considered family. But diamonds don't lie, and neither does my daddy. I'm going to show you evidence that the real thief is still walking free." Can you imagine the courage this girl had? Share this video with someone who needs inspiration. When Lucy returned to her seat, she noticed Assistant Prosecutor Cooper whispering urgently into his phone. His face had gone pale, and his hands were shaking. Something was very wrong, and Lucy was beginning to suspect what it was. The prosecution's first witness was Sarah Wilson, daughter of the construction company owner. At 32, she managed the company's finances with meticulous attention to detail. "Miss Wilson," Mitchell began, "please tell the court about the missing funds." Sarah's voice was steady but sad. $50,000 disappeared from our operating account over 3 months. The money was transferred to an account registered under Robert Martinez's name. Lucy watched her father's face contort with pain. He had worked for the Wilson family for 8 years, building their trust project by project. "And how did you discover this?" Mitchell continued. "Our accountant, Mrs. Garcia, noticed discrepancies in the monthly reports. When we investigated, we found falsified invoices for materials that were never delivered." Mitchell presented the evidence. Bank statements, transfer records, invoices, everything seemed to point directly to Robert Martinez. When it was Lucy's turn to cross-examine, she stood on a small stool that the bailiff had provided. "Miss Wilson," Lucy began, her voice gentle, "you said you trusted my father like family, right?" "Yes, I did. That's what makes this so heartbreaking. If someone wanted to steal from your company, they would need to know a lot about how your business works, wouldn't they?" Sarah nodded. "Yes, they would need access to our computer systems, knowledge of our suppliers, understanding of our payment schedules, and they would need to know exactly when and how to avoid getting caught." "Certainly." Lucy pulled a document from her briefcase. "Miss Wilson, this is a list of everyone who had access to your computer systems. Can you read the names to the jury?" Sarah's eyes widened as she read. "Sarah Wilson, Frank Wilson, Mrs. Garcia, Daniel Cooper." Her voice trailed off. "Daniel Cooper," Lucy repeated, looking directly at the assistant prosecutor who had gone white as a sheet. "That's Mr. Mitchell's assistant prosecutor, isn't it? The same Daniel Cooper who used to work for Wilson Construction before becoming a lawyer." The courtroom exploded in whispers. Mitchell jumped to his feet. "Objection. Relevance." "Your Honor," Lucy said, her young voice strong and clear, "Mr. Cooper had complete access to Wilson Construction's financial systems. He knew their procedures, their schedules, and their security measures. Isn't this relevant to who could have committed this crime?" Judge Harrison looked intrigued. "Objection overruled. Continue, Miss Martinez." Lucy turned back to Sarah. "When did Mr. Cooper stop working for your company?" "About 6 months ago, he left to join the prosecutor's office. Just 2 months before the thefts began." Sarah's face showed dawning understanding. "Yes, exactly 2 months." Cooper stood abruptly, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. "Your Honor, I need to step out. I'm not feeling well." "Miss Wilson, did Mr. Cooper ever ask about your new security procedures after he left the company?" Mitchell objected again, but Judge Harrison was now fully engaged. "I'll allow it." Sarah's voice was barely a whisper. "Yes, he called me several times, saying he was worried about his former employer's financial security. He asked about our new banking procedures and when we updated our password systems." Lucy looked at the jury, then at the empty chair where Cooper had been sitting. "No further questions, Your Honor." "This twist is incredible. Leave your like if you're impressed with this girl's intelligence." That night, Lucy sat at the kitchen table, surrounded by legal documents, when her mother, Sophia, returned from her nursing shift at Memorial Hospital. Dark circles shadowed Sophia's eyes, and her uniform was wrinkled from a 14-hour day. "Mija, how did it go today?" Sophia asked, kissing the top of Lucy's head. "I think I figured out who really stole the money, Mama, but now I'm scared that they know I figured it out." Sophia's heart tightened. Her 7-year-old daughter shouldn't have to carry this burden, but with no money for a lawyer and Robert's life hanging by a thread, they had no choice. "Tell me everything, Lucy." As Lucy explained about Daniel Cooper and his connection to Wilson Construction, Sophia's nursing instincts kicked in. She had seen enough people in crisis to recognize the signs of guilt and desperation. "You need to be very careful, Mija. Cornered animals are the most dangerous." Lucy nodded, but her attention was focused on the stack of documents before her. Hidden among her father's employment records, she had found something that didn't belong there. A photocopy of a resignation letter from Wilson Construction dated 6 months ago, but it wasn't Cooper's resignation letter. It was signed by someone named David Chen, the same last name as Mrs. Chen, the retired teacher on the jury. Lucy's mind raced. Why would this letter be in her father's file? She picked up her magnifying glass, another tool from her detective kit, and examined the letter more closely. The signature looked wrong. The handwriting was too clean, too practiced, and the date stamp showed it had been photocopied just 2 weeks ago, long after Cooper had already left the company. Someone had planted this evidence. Lucy's hands trembled as she realized the implications. If Cooper was willing to plant false evidence in her father's file, what else had he done? And more importantly, what would he do to stop her from exposing him? A noise outside made Lucy freeze. A car had stopped across the street, its headlights off. In the darkness, she could see a figure sitting in the driver's seat, watching their house. "Mama," Lucy whispered, "there's someone outside." Sophia looked through the curtain and immediately called 911, but by the time police arrived 20 minutes later, the car was gone. Officer Martinez, who had responded to the call, was skeptical. "Ma'am, there's no evidence that anyone was here. Could have been someone visiting a neighbor." But Lucy knew better. When the officer left, she noticed something that made her blood run cold. Lying on the front doorstep was a child's toy, a small plastic gavel like the one she had seen on Cooper's desk during the trial. The message was clear: stop investigating or face the consequences. Lucy picked up the toy gavel and held it tight. If Cooper thought he could intimidate a 7-year-old girl, he was about to learn how wrong he was. What an incredible discovery! This investigation is revealing a conspiracy much bigger than we imagined. But the revelation that shattered Lucy's understanding of the case came when she researched the prosecutor who had convicted David Rodriguez 15 years earlier, District Attorney William Morrison. The same William Morrison who was now Texas Attorney General. The same William Morrison who had the power to move up execution dates. Lucy's heart pounded as the pieces fell into place. Morrison had built his political career on high-profile convictions. The Rodriguez case had been his stepping stone to higher office. If David's innocence were proven, it wouldn't just free one man. It would destroy Morrison's career and expose a pattern of prosecutorial misconduct that could span decades. But Lucy's most shocking discovery came when she investigated the original witness, Thomas Walsh. According to public records, Walsh had died in a car accident 6 months after testifying against David Rodriguez. But Lucy's research revealed something terrifying. Thomas Walsh had received $50,000 from an anonymous source just 1 week before the trial. Someone had paid Walsh to lie, and when Walsh became a liability, he was eliminated. Lucy's hands shook as she called Professor Crawford. "Professor, I think David Rodriguez was framed by the same person who's now trying to execute him before we can prove his innocence." Crawford's voice was grim. "Lucy, if you're right, then you're not just fighting for an innocent man. You're taking on a conspiracy that reaches the highest levels of Texas government." Lucy looked at the photo of David Rodriguez she kept on her desk. A man who had spent 8 years on death row for a crime he didn't commit, whose execution was now just 2 weeks away. "Then that's what we'll do, Professor. We're going to bring them all down." 10 days before David Rodriguez's scheduled execution, Lucy Martinez received a phone call that changed everything. The voice on the other end was electronically disguised, but the message was crystal clear. "Stop investigating the Rodriguez case, little girl, or you and your family will regret it." Lucy trembled as she hung up the phone, but her determination only strengthened. She immediately called FBI agent Sarah Chen, who had been quietly investigating corruption in the Texas justice system. "Lucy," Agent Chen said during their secure video call, "we've been building a case against William Morrison for 3 years. Your investigation provided the missing pieces we needed, but you're in real danger now. Morrison's career, his freedom, everything depends on David Rodriguez dying before the truth comes out." Lucy was staying in a safe house near Harvard, protected by federal marshals, but she couldn't shake the feeling that time was running out for David. That's when Lucy made a decision that would shock the nation. She called a press conference for the morning of David Rodriguez's execution. Every major news network, newspaper, and online outlet would be there. She would present all her evidence publicly, expose the conspiracy, and force the world to see what was happening. If you're anxious to see how this story ends, turn on notifications for the channel. Ladies and gentlemen, Lucy began, standing behind a podium specially lowered for her height. My name is Lucy Martinez, and I'm here to tell you about the greatest miscarriage of justice I've ever witnessed. For 20 minutes, Lucy presented her case with devastating precision. She presented the library records that proved David's alibi. She showed the financial records proving Thomas Walsh was paid to lie. She revealed the pattern of prosecutorial misconduct that had characterized Morrison's career. David Rodriguez has been on death row for 8 years because William Morrison needed a conviction to advance his political career, Lucy declared, her young voice carrying the weight of absolute conviction. In 6 hours, an innocent man will die unless we stop this charade. But Lucy's most powerful moment came when she looked directly into the cameras and spoke from the heart. I'm 8 years old, she said, her voice breaking slightly with emotion. I should be in 3rd grade, worrying about spelling tests and playground fights. Instead, I'm here fighting for a man's life because the adults who should protect justice failed him. She paused, gathering strength for her final appeal. David Rodriguez wrote to me because he had nowhere else to turn. He believed that even a child could see the truth when adults refused to look. Today, I'm asking all of you to be children again, to see this case with clear eyes and honest hearts, to demand justice, not because it's politically convenient, but because it's right. Lucy's press conference was broadcast live across the nation. Social media exploded with support for David Rodriguez. Protesters gathered outside the Texas state capitol. Phone lines to the governor's office jammed with calls demanding clemency. At 5:47 p.m., on what should have been David Rodriguez's last day on Earth, Lucy Martinez sat in a secure FBI conference room, watching the most important phone call of her life. FBI agent Sarah Chen held the receiver with steady hands, but Lucy could see the tension in her eyes. Governor Williams, Agent Chen said into the phone, we have irrefutable evidence that David Rodriguez is innocent and that Attorney General William Morrison orchestrated his wrongful conviction. We need this execution stayed immediately. Lucy held her breath. Yes, sir, Agent Chen continued. I understand the political implications, but an innocent man's life is at stake. At exactly 6:00 p.m., as Lucy watched the news coverage, breaking news flashed across every screen. Texas Attorney General William Morrison arrested on federal conspiracy charges. Lucy's hands flew to her mouth as she watched Morrison being led away in handcuffs, his political career ending in the most public disgrace imaginable. FBI agents simultaneously raided his office and home, finding evidence not just of David Rodriguez's wrongful conviction, but a pattern of corruption spanning 2 decades. Agent Chen hung up the phone with a smile that lit up the entire room. Lucy, Governor Williams has granted a full pardon to David Rodriguez. He's being released immediately. Lucy burst into tears, not of sadness, but of overwhelming relief and joy. She had done it. Against impossible odds, she had saved an innocent man's life and exposed a conspiracy that reached the highest levels of government. What an emotional moment. If you got emotional like I did, leave a like and share this inspiring story. 3 hours later, Lucy stood outside Huntsville State Penitentiary as David Rodriguez walked through the gates, a free man. At 35, he looked older than his years, but his eyes shone with something Lucy had never seen before: complete freedom. Lucy, David said, kneeling to her level, tears streaming down his face. You gave me back my life. How can I thank you? Lucy hugged him tight, this man she had fought so hard to save. Mr. Rodriguez, you don't need to thank me. You just need to live the life you were meant to live. The media frenzy that followed was unprecedented. Lucy's story captured the imagination of the entire world. But the most significant outcome wasn't the news coverage or the book deals or the movie rights that Hollywood offered. It was the call Lucy received the next morning from Chief Justice Margaret Roberts of the United States Supreme Court. Lucy, Justice Roberts said, her voice filled with admiration. "What you've accomplished is nothing short of miraculous. But more than that, you've exposed fundamental flaws in our justice system that we can no longer ignore." Lucy listened intently as Justice Roberts explained that her case had triggered an emergency review of the entire American legal system. "Because of your work, Congress is drafting the Rodriguez Act, comprehensive judicial reform that will prevent wrongful convictions and ensure that no innocent person ever faces execution again. You've literally changed the course of American justice." But the revelation that took Lucy's breath away came next. "Lucy, there's one more thing. Your legal work on the Rodriguez case has been reviewed by constitutional scholars across the nation. Your brief was so thoroughly researched, so brilliantly argued, that it's being studied in law schools as a masterpiece of legal reasoning." Justice Roberts paused, and Lucy could hear the smile in her voice. "Lucy Martinez, at 8 years old, you've just become the youngest person in American history to single-handedly overturn a death sentence, expose government corruption, and inspire federal legislation. You're not just a remarkable child, you're a legal pioneer who will be remembered alongside the greatest champions of justice in our nation's history." 6 months later, Lucy stood in the White House Rose Garden as President Johnson signed the Rodriguez Act into law. David Rodriguez stood beside her, now working as a victims' rights advocate, dedicating his freedom to helping others who had been betrayed by the system. "Lucy," President Johnson said as he handed her the ceremonial pen used to sign the legislation, "you've proven that justice isn't about age or experience. It's about courage, determination, and an unwavering belief that truth will prevail." Lucy looked out at the crowd gathered for the ceremony. Her parents, Professor Crawford, Judge Harrison, and hundreds of others who had supported her journey. But her eyes found David Rodriguez, the man whose life she had saved, who now had the chance to fulfill his dreams. "Mr. President," Lucy said, her voice clear and strong, "my daddy always told me that doing the right thing isn't always easy, but it's always worth it. Today I know he was right." And as applause echoed through the Rose Garden, Lucy Martinez, now 9 years old, realized her journey was just beginning. She had saved one innocent man, but there were thousands of others who needed her help. The girl who had entered a courtroom trembling with fear had become something the world had never seen before. A child who could move mountains, change laws, and prove that even the smallest voice could speak the loudest truth. And somewhere in Texas, William Morrison sat in a federal prison cell, finally paying the price for his crimes, while David Rodriguez walked free under the same sun that was once scheduled to set on his life forever. Justice, Lucy had learned, wasn't just about winning cases. It was about ensuring that no one, no matter how small, young, or powerless they seemed, ever had to face injustice alone. America's youngest lawyer had become something even more remarkable, a beacon of hope for anyone who had ever been told their fight was impossible, and Lucy Martinez was just getting started. What an incredible story. If this story inspired you, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, leave your like and hit that notification bell for more inspiring stories like this one. Share in the comments which part moved you the most. And remember, never underestimate the power of one determined person to make a difference, regardless of age. Until next time. Tension. This story is getting more and more exciting. Hit that notification bell so you don't miss any videos. The next morning brought unexpected drama. Assistant Prosecutor Daniel Cooper was nowhere to be found. His secretary told Judge Harrison that he had called in sick with food poisoning, but Lucy noticed Mitchell's worried glances toward the empty chair. "Your Honor," Mitchell announced, "the prosecution calls Tom Bradley to the stand." Tom Bradley, a heavy-set man in his 50s with graying hair, took the oath with confidence. As Wilson Construction's night security guard, his testimony was crucial to the prosecution's case. "Mr. Bradley," Mitchell began, "please tell the court what you saw on the night of March 15th. I was making my regular rounds when I saw Robert Martinez entering the building around 11 p.m. He used his access card and went straight to Mr. Wilson's office. Did you find this unusual? Very unusual. Employees weren't supposed to be there after 9 p.m. without special authorization. Lucy listened carefully, taking notes in her childish handwriting. But something bothered her about Bradley's testimony. She had spent hours the night before calling the security company that employed Bradley, and what she had learned was explosive. "Mr. Bradley," Mitchell continued, "what did you do when you saw Mr. Martinez?" "I followed him and watched through the office window. I saw him open the safe and remove several items. Then he used the computer for about 20 minutes. "And you're certain it was Robert Martinez?" "Absolutely certain. I've known him for 8 years. Mitchell smiled confidently. No further questions. Lucy stood, her stool ready. The courtroom was packed now. Word had spread about the girl fighting the prosecutor's office, and reporters filled the back rows. "Mr. Bradley," Lucy began, her voice clear and strong, "you said you saw my father at 11 p.m. on March 15th, correct?" "That's right." Lucy pulled out a document. "This is your time card from Secure Guard Services for March 15th. Can you tell the jury what time you clocked out that night?" Bradley's confident expression wavered slightly. "I'm not sure. I don't remember exactly. According to this official record, you clocked out at 8:47 p.m. Your shift ended at 9 p.m., but you left early. How could you have seen my father at 11 p.m. if you weren't even working?" The courtroom buzzed with whispers. Mitchell jumped up. "Objection. Foundation." "Your Honor," Lucy said, "I have a sworn statement from Mr. Peterson, the supervisor at Secure Guard Services, confirming these records." Judge Harrison examined the document. "Objection overruled. Continue, Miss Martinez." Lucy turned back to Bradley, whose face was now red with perspiration. "Mr. Bradley, you weren't at Wilson Construction on March 15th at 11 p.m., were you?" I may have confused the dates. Or maybe someone paid you to lie about seeing my father there." "Objection," Mitchell shouted. "Speculation." "I'll withdraw that question, Your Honor." Lucy pulled out another document. "Mr. Bradley, have you ever received money from Daniel Cooper?" Bradley's hands began to shake. "I don't have to answer that." "Actually, you do," Judge Harrison said firmly. "Answer the question." Daniel helped me with some bills once, but that had nothing to do with this case." Lucy's heart was pounding, but her voice remained steady. "When did Mr. Cooper give you that money, Mr. Bradley?" "I don't remember exactly." Lucy handed another document to the court clerk. "This is a copy of a check from Daniel Cooper to Tom Bradley, dated March 20th, just 5 days after you allegedly saw my father at the company. The amount is $1,500. What bills was he helping you pay, Mr. Bradley?" The courtroom fell silent, except for the scratching of reporters' pens. Bradley looked at Mitchell desperately, but the prosecutor's face had gone grey. I can't remember." "Mr. Bradley," Lucy said, her young voice filled with righteous anger, "did Daniel Cooper pay you to lie about seeing my father that night?" Bradley's composure cracked completely. "I needed the money, my wife's medical bills. Cooper said it wouldn't hurt anyone, that Martinez was guilty anyway." The courtroom exploded. Judge Harrison banged her gavel repeatedly. "Order! Order in the court!" "Dun! What a dramatic moment! If you're on the edge of your seat watching this, leave a comment below." As Tom Bradley collapsed on the witness stand, confessing his perjury, Lucy knew the tide had turned. But she also knew the most dangerous part was yet to come. Cooper was desperate now, and desperate people do dangerous things. During recess, Lucy's mother approached with tears in her eyes. "Mija, I'm so proud of you, but I'm also scared. What if this man Cooper tries to hurt you?" Lucy hugged her mother tight. "Mama, Daddy always told me that doing the right thing isn't always easy, but it's always worth it. I won't let them destroy our family." When court resumed, Mitchell looked like a man who had aged 10 years in one morning. "Your Honor, in light of new evidence, the prosecution requests a brief recess to review our case." But Judge Harrison wasn't having it. "Mr. Mitchell, you've had months to prepare. We're proceeding." Lucy stood, her heart racing but her determination stronger than ever. "Your Honor, I'd like to call my next witness. I call Frank Wilson to the stand." Frank Wilson, the elderly owner of Wilson Construction, looked confused as he took the oath. At 72, he had built his company from nothing and trusted his employees like family. "Mr. Wilson," Lucy began, "you said you trusted my father completely, right? Robert was like a son to me. That's why this whole situation has been so devastating." Lucy nodded sympathetically. "Sir, do you remember when you upgraded your computer security system?" "Yes. About 4 months ago, Daniel Cooper recommended we upgrade everything. He said there were new threats to small businesses." Lucy felt the pieces clicking into place. "And who helped you install that new system?" "Daniel helped. He stayed late several nights to make sure everything was set up properly. Said he wanted to make sure we were protected." "Mr. Wilson, during those nights when Mr. Cooper was alone with your computer system, did he ask for the new passwords and access codes?" Frank's face began to show understanding. "Yes, he said he needed them to test the security. I gave him full administrative access." Lucy pulled out her final piece of evidence, a document she had saved exactly for this moment. "Mr. Wilson, I'd like you to look at this bank statement. It shows the account where the stolen money was deposited." Frank examined the document, his hands shaking slightly. "It says it's Robert's account, but what? The address on this account isn't Robert's address. It's 1247 Oak Street, apartment 3B. That's where Daniel Cooper lives. I helped him move there when he left the company." The courtroom exploded in gasps and whispers. Lucy felt a wave of triumph, but it was tempered by the knowledge that she had just exposed a dangerous criminal who had everything to lose. When Frank Wilson stepped down from the witness stand, his face full of remorse for doubting Robert, Lucy knew she had proven her father's innocence. But her victory was interrupted by a commotion at the back of the courtroom. Officer Martinez burst through the doors, his radio crackling with urgent messages. "Your Honor," Martinez announced, "we have a situation. Daniel Cooper has been apprehended trying to flee to Mexico with over $100,000 in cash. He has confessed to embezzling from Wilson Construction and framing Robert Martinez." The courtroom erupted in cheers, but Lucy's triumph was bittersweet. As she looked at her father's tear-streaked face, she realized this was just the beginning of her fight for justice. What an incredible ending to this first part. But Lucy's story is far from over. Keep watching to see how she becomes America's youngest lawyer. 3 months after Robert Martinez walked free from Jefferson County Courthouse, Lucy's life had transformed in ways she never could have imagined. The girl who had trembled with her oversized briefcase was now the subject of national headlines. But fame came with a price Lucy hadn't expected. Their small apartment on Maple Street was now constantly surrounded by news vans and reporters. Lucy couldn't walk to the library without being followed by cameras. One morning brought an unexpected visitor. Judge Harrison was at their door, her usual stern expression softened with genuine concern. "Mrs. Martinez, may I speak with Lucy?" Judge Harrison asked. "I have a proposition that might interest you both." In their small living room, Judge Harrison explained that the American Bar Association was considering creating a special provision for exceptional minors to practice law under strict supervision. Lucy would be the first candidate for this revolutionary program. "Lucy," Judge Harrison said, "you've shown remarkable legal ability, but you need proper training. Harvard Law School has offered to create a special educational program for you." Lucy's eyes widened. Harvard Law School, the place she had only dreamed of while reading law books at the library. That night, as Lucy lay in bed, she heard her parents talking in low voices. Her father, Robert, was struggling to find work since his release. Word of his arrest had spread through the construction industry, and despite his exoneration, employers were hesitant to hire him. "Maybe Lucy's gift is the answer to our prayers," Robert whispered. "If she becomes a famous lawyer, she can help families like ours. She can make sure no innocent person goes through what I went through." But Sophia's voice was thick with tears. She's just a baby, Robert. I don't want to lose my little girl to the world. Lucy closed her eyes and made a decision that would change everything. She would go to Harvard, but not for fame or money. She would go to become a voice for people who had no voice, a defender of those who couldn't defend themselves. Cambridge, Massachusetts seemed like another world to Lucy Martinez. The ancient brick buildings of Harvard Law School towered above her like giants, their ivy-covered walls whispering centuries of legal tradition. At 7 years old, surrounded by professors and graduate students, Lucy had never felt smaller or more determined. Dean Margaret Whitfield, a distinguished woman in her 60s with silver hair and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses, had designed Lucy's special program personally. "Lucy," she explained on her first day, "you'll attend modified lectures, work with a tutor, and most importantly, observe real cases in our legal clinic." Lucy's tutor was Professor James Crawford, a former Supreme Court clerk who specialized in constitutional law. During their first session, he tested Lucy's knowledge with complex hypothetical cases. "Lucy, imagine a scenario where a confession was obtained without proper Miranda rights, but the defendant is clearly guilty based on physical evidence. How do you proceed?" Lucy considered carefully. "Professor Crawford, guilt doesn't matter if the system is broken. If we allow constitutional rights violations for some people, we create a precedent that endangers everyone's rights." Crawford's eyebrows rose with surprise and admiration. "Excellent reasoning. But what if the defendant committed a violent crime? What about the victims? Then we find another way to prove guilt that respects the law," Lucy replied firmly. "Justice isn't about taking shortcuts. It's about doing things the right way, even when it's harder." If you're impressed with this girl's wisdom, share this video to inspire more people. 3 months into her Harvard experience, Lucy received a letter that would change everything. It came from a maximum security prison in Texas, written in careful handwriting by a man named David Rodriguez. "Dear Lucy," the letter began, "I saw you on the news, and I'm writing because I have nowhere else to turn. I've been on death row for 8 years for a murder I didn't commit. My court-appointed lawyer barely spoke to me, and key evidence was never presented. I have 3 months before my execution date. I know you're just a child, but you're my only hope." Lucy read the letter 3 times, her hands shaking. Death row, execution. These weren't words a 7-year-old should have to understand, but Lucy understood them perfectly. She took the letter to Professor Crawford, who read it with a grave expression. "Lucy, death penalty cases are extraordinarily complex. They require years of experience and massive resources." "But what if he's innocent?" Lucy asked. "What if David Rodriguez dies because no one will listen to him?" Crawford studied Lucy's determined face and made a decision that would shock the legal establishment. "If you're serious about this, I'll help you, but we'll need to assemble a team, and we'll be working against impossible odds." Within a week, Lucy had assembled an unprecedented legal team. Professor Crawford provided constitutional expertise. Sarah Chen, a brilliant third-year student, handled research. Dr. Patricia Williams, a forensic specialist, agreed to review the evidence pro bono. But when Lucy called David Rodriguez's prison to schedule a consultation, she encountered her first major obstacle. "I'm sorry, miss," the warden said with barely concealed amusement, "but children aren't allowed in maximum security facilities, no exceptions." Lucy felt her heart sink, but then she remembered her father's words. "When someone tells you something is impossible, Mia, that's when you know it's worth fighting for." The next morning, Lucy filed a federal lawsuit against the Texas Department of Criminal Justice, demanding the right to represent her client regardless of her age. This girl never gives up. If you're also someone who doesn't give up on your dreams, leave your like. The federal courthouse in Austin, Texas, seethed with tension as Lucy Martinez, now 8 years old, prepared to argue her case for the right to visit death row. 3 television networks broadcast the proceedings live, and protesters on both sides filled the courthouse steps. Judge Robert Sterling, A Reagan appointee known for his strict constitutional interpretation looked at Lucy with curiosity and concern. "Miss Martinez, do you understand the gravity of what you're requesting? Maximum security facilities have age restrictions for public safety reasons." Lucy stood at the plaintiff's table, flanked by Professor Crawford and a team of Harvard law students. Despite her small stature, her voice carried clearly through the courtroom. "Your Honor, the Sixth Amendment guarantees every defendant the right to adequate representation. David Rodriguez chose me as his attorney. The state cannot deny that right based solely on my age." Texas Attorney General Patricia Collins, a formidable woman in her 50s, rose to respond. "Your Honor, this is about more than age. A maximum security facility houses our state's most dangerous criminals. No child should be exposed to that environment, regardless of their legal abilities." Lucy had anticipated this argument. "Your Honor, I'm not asking for unrestricted access. I'm requesting supervised attorney-client meetings in a secure conference room, the same rights granted to every other attorney in Texas." During the lunch recess, Professor Crawford pulled Lucy aside. "Lucy, I've been researching David Rodriguez's original case. There are some disturbing inconsistencies." Lucy listened intently as Crawford explained. The key witness who identified Rodriguez changed his story 3 times. The murder weapon was found 2 weeks after the crime scene was supposedly sealed, and the DNA evidence that convicted him was processed by a lab that has since been discredited for falsifying results. "So he really is innocent?" Lucy asked, though she suspected as much from his letters. "More than that," Crawford said grimly. "I think someone deliberately framed him, and I think they're very nervous that you're getting involved." That afternoon, Judge Sterling delivered his decision. While this court recognizes the unusual circumstances of this case, the Sixth Amendment does indeed guarantee the right to counsel of choice. Miss Martinez will be allowed supervised visits with her client with appropriate security measures. Lucy's victory was interrupted by unexpected news. David Rodriguez's execution date had been moved up by 2 months. Instead of having 3 months to prepare, she now had only 4 weeks. "This is highly irregular," Professor Crawford told Lucy as they reviewed the court order. "Execution dates are rarely moved up without extraordinary circumstances." Lucy studied the document, her 8-year-old mind processing implications that would challenge experienced attorneys. "Professor, what if someone wants David Rodriguez dead before we can prove his innocence? The tension is building. Can you feel the pressure this girl is facing? Comment your thoughts." The next morning brought more disturbing news. Dr. Patricia Williams, the forensic specialist who had agreed to review Rodriguez's case, called with alarming information. "Lucy, I've been trying to access the original evidence from David's case, but I'm being told it was destroyed. All of it. DNA samples, fingerprints, even the murder weapon. Supposedly it was routine disposal, but the timing is suspicious." Lucy felt a chill of fear, but also a surge of determination. "Dr. Williams, they can destroy evidence, but they can't destroy witnesses. David's original lawyer is still alive, and so is the prosecutor who put him on death row." The maximum security unit at Huntsville State Penitentiary felt like entering another world. Lucy walked through multiple checkpoints, her 8-year-old hand dwarfed by the massive security doors that closed behind her. Captain of the Guard Morris, a stern but surprisingly gentle man, escorted her to the attorney conference room. "Miss Martinez," Captain Morris said quietly, "in 30 years working here, I've never seen anything like this. That man has maintained his innocence every single day for 8 years, never caused trouble, never stopped hoping. Most death row inmates, they change after a while. David Rodriguez hasn't changed. Makes you think." When Lucy first saw David Rodriguez through the reinforced glass, her heart broke. At 35, he looked older than his years, his dark hair prematurely gray, his eyes holding a sadness that seemed bottomless. But when he smiled at her, she saw something else. Hope. "You must be Lucy," David said through the intercom, his voice gentle despite everything. I can't believe a little girl is willing to fight for me when the whole system gave up. Lucy opened her briefcase, a new one, properly sized for her growing collection of legal documents. Mr. Rodriguez, I believe you're innocent, but I need you to tell me everything about the night Patricia Hendris was murdered. David's story was heartbreaking. 15 years ago, he had been a college student working part-time at a convenience store to pay for his studies. On the night of the murder, he had been studying at the library until closing, then had gone straight home to his apartment. The police arrested me 3 days later, David explained. They said a witness saw me leaving Patricia's apartment building at the time she was killed. But Lucy, I never knew Patricia Hendris. I didn't know she existed until they accused me of killing her. Lucy took careful notes, her young mind already identifying inconsistencies. Who was this witness? A man named Thomas Walsh. He claimed he saw me running from the building. But Lucy, I was at the library that night. I checked out 3 books at 9:15 p.m., just 15 minutes before the murder supposedly happened. The library was 3 miles away. Lucy's pulse quickened. Mr. Rodriguez, do you still have the library receipts? David's face fell. My original lawyer said they weren't important. He never presented them at trial. After her visit, Lucy returned to Harvard with burning determination. She immediately called the Austin Public Library and spoke with Mrs. Henderson, the head librarian. Miss Martinez, I remember that night perfectly, Mrs. Henderson said. David Rodriguez was one of our regular students, very polite, very dedicated. He was here until we closed at 9:30 p.m. I remember specifically because he asked to check out additional books for his criminal justice studies. Lucy's hands trembled as she wrote down Mrs. Henderson's statement. David Rodriguez couldn't have committed the murder. He had a bulletproof alibi that was never presented at his trial. What incredible discovery! This research is revealing a much larger conspiracy than we imagine. But the revelation that destroyed Emma's understanding about the case came when he investigated the prosecutor who had sentenced David Martinez 15 years before. District Prosecutor William Morrison. William Morrison himself, who was now Texas Attorney General. William Morrison himself, who had the power to advance execution dates. Emma's heart beat as the pieces fit. Morrison had built his political career in high-profile sentences. The Martinez case had been his springboard to higher charges. If David's innocence was proven, he would not only free a man, he would destroy Morrison's career and expose a pattern of fiscal misconduct that could cover decades. But Emma's most shocking discovery came when he investigated the original witness, Thomas Walsh. According to public records, Walsh had died in a car accident 6 months after testifying against David Martinez. But Emma's investigation revealed something scary. Thomas Walsh had received $50,000 from an anonymous source only 1 week before trial. Someone had paid Walsh to lie, and when Walsh became an obstacle, he was eliminated. Emma's hands trembled while calling Professor Crawford. Professor, I think David Martinez was incriminated by the same person who is now trying to execute him before we can prove his innocence. Crawford's voice was bleak. Emma, if you are right, then you are not only fighting for an innocent man, you are facing a conspiracy that reaches the highest levels of the Texas government. Emma looked at the photo of David Martinez, who kept on her desk. A man who had spent 8 years in the death corridor for a crime he did not commit, whose execution was now just 2 weeks. So that's what we will do, Professor. We are going to tear them down to all. 10 days before David Martinez's scheduled execution, Emma Rodriguez received a call that changed everything. The voice on the other side was electronically disguised, but the message was crystalline. Stop investigating the Martinez little girl, or you and your family are going to regret it. Emma trembled when she hangs the phone, but her determination was only strengthened. He immediately called FBI Sarah Chen agent who had been silently investigating corruption in the Texas justice system. Emma, said Agent Chen during her safe video call, we have been building a case against William Morrison for 3 years. Your research provided the missing pieces we needed, but now you are in real danger. Morrison's career, his freedom, Everything depends on David Martinez dies before the truth comes out. Emma stayed in a safe apartment near Harvard, protected by federal sheriffs, but could not get rid of the feeling that time was exhausted for David. It was then that Emma made a decision that would shock the nation. He called a press conference for the morning of David Martinez's execution. All the main news chains, newspapers and media online would be there. He would present all his evidence publicly. He would expose the conspiracy and force the world to see what was happening. If you are eager to see how this story ends, activate channel notifications. Ladies and gentlemen, Emma started, stopped behind a podium specially lowered for height. My name is Emma Rodriguez, and I'm here to tell you about the greatest judicial failure that I have ever witnessed. For 20 minutes, Emma presented her case with devastating precision, presented the library records that tested David's alibi. He showed the financial records testing that Thomas Walsh was paid to lie, revealed the pattern of fiscal misconduct that had characterized Morrison's career. David Martinez has been in the death corridor for 8 years because William Morrison needed a conviction to advance his political career, Emma declared, his young voice carrying the weight of absolute conviction. In 6 hours, an innocent man will die unless we stop this farce. But Emma's most powerful moment came when she looked directly at the cameras and spoke from her heart. I am 8 years old, he said, his voice breaking slightly with emotion. I should be in 3rd degree, worrying about spelling exams and fights at recess. Instead, I am here fighting for the life of a man because adults who should protect justice failed him. He paused, gathering strength for his final appeal. David Martinez wrote to me because he had nowhere to resort to. Emma's press conference was broadcast live throughout the nation. Social networks exploded with support to David Martinez. Protesters gathered outside the state capital of Texas. The telephone lines of the governor's office were congested with calls demanding clemency. At 5:47 p.m., in what should be David Martinez's last day on earth, Emma Rodriguez sat down in a safe conference room of the FBI, seeing the most important call of his life. FBI Sarah Chen agent held the receiver with firm hands, but Emma could see the tension in her eyes. Governor Williams, said Agent Chen on the phone, we have irrefutable evidence that David Martinez is innocent and that Attorney General William Morrison orchestrated his unfair sentence. We need this execution to be suspended immediately. Emma held her breath. Yes, sir, Agent Chen continued. I understand the political implications, but the life of an innocent man is at stake. At exactly 6 p.m., while Emma saw the news coverage, last-minute news appeared on all screens. Texas Attorney General William Morrison, arrested by federal conspiracy positions. Emma's hands flew to her mouth while seeing Morrison being worn. His political career ending in imaginable more public misfortune. FBI agents raided his office and house simultaneously, finding evidence not only of David Martinez's unfair conviction, but a corruption pattern that extended for 2 decades. Agent Chen hung the phone with a smile that illuminated the entire room. Emma, Governor Williams granted a complete forgiveness to David Martinez. He is being released immediately. Emma exploded in tears, not of sadness, but of overwhelming relief and joy. He had succeeded. Against impossible probabilities, he had saved the life of an innocent man and exposed a conspiracy that reached the highest levels of the government. What exciting moment. If they got excited like me, leave a like and share this inspiring story. 3 hours later, Emma was out of Huntsville State Penitentiary while David Martinez walked through the doors, a free man. At 35, he seemed older than his years, but his eyes shone with something Emma had never seen before, full freedom. Emma, David said, kneeling at his level, tears running down his face, you returned my life. How can I thank you? Emma hugged him strong, this man for whom he had fought so much to save. Mr. Martinez, he doesn't need to thank me. He just needs to live the life he was destined to live. The media frenzy that followed was unprecedented. Emma's story captured the imagination of the entire world. But the most significant result was not the news coverage or book contracts or cinematographic rights that Hollywood offered. It was the call that Emma received on the morning from the President of the Margaret Roberts Supreme Court of the United States. "Emma," Roberts Justice said, his voice full of admiration, "what you have achieved is nothing less than miraculous. But more than that, you have exposed fundamental failures in our justice system that we can no longer ignore." Emma listened intensely while Justice Roberts explained that her case had caused an emergency review of the entire American legal system. "For your work, the Congress is writing the Martinez Law, an understanding judicial reform that will prevent unfair sentences and ensure that no innocent person ever faces execution again. You have literally changed the course of American justice." But the revelation that removed Emma's breath came later. "Emma, there is one more thing. Your legal work in the Martinez case has been reviewed by constitutional academics throughout the nation. Your summary was so carefully investigated, so brilliantly argued, that it is being studied in law schools as a masterpiece of legal reasoning." Justice Roberts paused, and Emma could hear the smile in his voice. "Emma Rodriguez, at 8 years, you have just become the youngest person in American history to reverse a death sentence, expose government corruption, and inspire federal legislation. You are not just a notable girl. You are a legal pioneer who will be remembered along with the greatest defenders of justice in the history of our nation." 6 months later, Emma was in the roses of the White House while President Johnson signed Martinez Law. David Martinez was by his side, now working as a defender of victims' rights, dedicating his freedom to helping others who had been betrayed by the system. "Emma," President Johnson said as he handed him the ceremonial pen used to sign the legislation, "you have tried that justice is not about age or experience. It is about courage, determination, and unwavering belief that the truth will prevail." Emma looked at the crowd gathered for the ceremony. His parents, Professor Crawford, Judge Harrison, and hundreds of others who had supported his day. But his eyes found David Martinez, the man whose life had saved, who now had the opportunity to realize his dreams. "Mr. President," Emma said, his clear and strong voice, "my dad always told me that doing the right thing is not always easy, but it is always worth it. Today, I know he was right." While applause resonated by Rosa's garden, Emma Rodriguez, now 9 years old, realized that his day was just beginning. He had saved an innocent man, but there were thousands of others who needed his help. The girl who had entered a court trembling with fear had become something that the world had never seen before. A girl who could move mountains, change laws, and prove that even the smallest voice could speak the strongest truth. And somewhere in Texas, William Morrison sat in a federal prison cell, finally paying the price for his crimes, while David Martinez walked free under the same sun that was once scheduled to put himself in his life forever. Justice, Emma had learned, was not just about winning cases. It was about ensuring that no one, regardless of how small, young, or unable it seems, never had to face injustice alone. The youngest lawyer in American history had become even more noticeable, a lighthouse of hope for anyone who had ever been said that their fight was impossible, and Emma Rodriguez was barely starting. What incredible story! If this story inspired you, do not forget to subscribe to the channel, leave your like, and activate the bell for more inspiring stories like this. Share in the comments. What was the part that moved you the most? And remember, never underestimate the power of a specific person to make a difference regardless of age. Until next.